Hi everyone, Todd from Subarugears here. I want to give you a bit of an explanation of our new two-wheel drive only high power pinion gears. This is our new two-wheel drive high power pinion gear that's only suitable for two-wheel drive into the all-wheel drive 5-speed and 6-speed transmissions. You can see it's a lot thicker here on the front than the traditional pinion that's been designed for the two-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, and I wanted to explain to you how this is developed and how this is different so that you can understand how things need to be put together. In order to explain a bit more, we'll start by giving you a bit more of an explanation of the Subaru all-wheel drive system. Okay, so the basic Subaru all-wheel drive system, this is the driven gear system. You can see this is a pinion with a rear bearing and front bearing on the pinion. That spins within the housing. It also contains the 1st to 5th driven gears and reverse gear on another shaft. So the entire shaft can spin, but also the pinion can spin inside this driven gear shaft. That's what allows the all-wheel drive system to work, because the center differential is actually transferring this power to the front differential. You can see these 5 driven gears are actually mounted on this hollow tube. This is where the power is transferred through the transmission into the center differential. This is the all-wheel drive style pinion gear that's fitted into this tube. Okay, so the all-wheel drive pinion system that is usually rotating inside this hollow gear tube has a couple of interesting features. Because it needs to spin, it has a front bearing and a rear bearing. These sit inside these driven gear tubes and allow it to spin. Now in the two-wheel drive application, where these two are locked together with our coupler, these bearings really don't serve any purpose. They're just there to hold the pinion shaft in place. They don't actually spin because this spins as one complete unit. There's also a thrust washer and a thrust bearing at the front here that usually allow things to spin together like this, which again provide no purpose when these two are locked together. And at the rear there is also thrust bearings and thrust washers here that again don't provide any purpose. So we were thinking about whether or not any of these things are able to be removed and changed in the two-wheel drive setup. What we did with the two-wheel drive high power ring and pinion is we made some changes to the pinion design in order to improve the strength and reduce some of the possible areas where fatigue can set in. With the all-wheel drive pinion, there is still a drilled front and some oil holes in the shaft which have the possibility of fatigue cracking over time. New ring and pinion, solid. That's just a centre in order to centre it on the machine, but solid here because there's no need to provide lubrication for the shaft spinning within a shaft. There's no bearings on this anymore, we remove them. So what you can see is we still have this front bearing, but the bearing journal for it is much thicker. The reason it's thicker is we've replaced the washer and the thrust washer with material here to give us increased thickness in the front here. These aren't needed anymore because none of this is spinning within the tube. The second thing that we did is remove the need for this bearing. Because this isn't needed anymore, we can press fit the pinion into the tube. So we've increased the thickness of the material here to the same outside diameter as this bearing and not use this bearing anymore. We've increased some thicknesses along here. And then at the rear this is the same, but what we provide you with now is we provide you with a solid bushing rather than a rear bearing, because again it doesn't need to spin, and this gives better support throughout the pinion when it's pressed into the tube. This gives you a nice solid press fit. Okay, so I just wanted to show the people at home that when you were changing over the old Subaru pinion to the reverse pinion, the front bearing is held on with this collar. Now some people think it's very difficult to remove this collar and need a special press and forks and so on. But it's actually reasonably simple, and you shouldn't be able have to use a heck of a lot of force to be able to get it off. For example, we've just got 2 big screwdrivers today, and see if we can just lever it. So if we just put the 2 big screwdrivers in underneath the collar and the bearing and just push up, you can actually just push the collar right off. You can see it coming away with just the force from my hands. And a couple of those around, and it should just pop off. And then your bearing comes away, and you can inspect that and see that that's all okay. These are very, very tough cages and rollers, so you may not necessarily need to replace them if you haven't done any damage and they've done low kilometres. Okay, let's do this assembly. The bearing you can see has got a dimple in it. This goes into a dimple in the case. This should be facing away from the gear head. So Just slide that over the pinion, and that should fit nicely over here. There it is, spinning nicely. Then the next thing that we do is we simply insert the pinion into the gear tube. And as this is a press fit, we get it loosely in there. Put the solid bush on the end, slide it over the splines, and get it to start seating into the driven gear tube. Now we're going to do the assembly of the two-wheel drive high power pinion into the driven gear hollow shaft. Normally you'll still have all the gears on here, but we've just slid it into the shaft. We've got the front bearing on there, and it's not quite home. It's almost home, but it's still loose enough that we can turn the two if we really try. We've pushed the solid bushing in at the back to align everything. You can just see a bit of it still sticking out, but we've tried to expose as much of the splines as possible. It's just pretty much a case of standing it up and sliding it over the two. You can still turn the two together to try to get these two splines to line up, but you should be a-okay. And then it's a case of putting the washers over the end and the pinion nut. Torque the pinion nut up and stake it, and you will have a complete splined high power two-wheel drive assembly.